And we're live. Welcome back to the Wheelie Podcast, everybody. I'm your host, Mike Atoll, and I'm joined again by Electrek Seth Weintraub. How's it going, Seth?
I'm good.
Awesome. And we have a bunch of interesting new e-bike and a few e-moto stories to cover this week. A few things from JackRabbit putting out this cool solar charger for e-bike batteries. We've got some new e-bikes to cover. We've got some interesting laws. The UK almost allowed double the power for electric bicycles. I say almost because we're going to get to that. We've got some interesting e-moto news as well. The Dallas Cowboys all got new electric motorcycles, believe it or not. We've got some unfortunate news about a big name in the electric motorcycle world, unfortunately entering receivership, basically going bankrupt, and more. But where are we going to start with this week, Seth?
All right. The UK backtracks on plans to double the power of electric bikes.
Yeah, this was almost a too good to be true kind of situation, depending on your views on this. In the UK, they've got similar electric bicycle laws to most of Europe, where it's 250 watts and a 25 kilometer per hour speed limit. That's 15 and a half miles per hour. And so this is a very divisive topic, the regulations for e-bikes. There are a lot of people that would love to see these higher. But at the same time, many people in the UK are quite happy that e-bikes cannot go as fast or be as powerful as North American e-bikes. There was a proposal put forward by the Conservatives in the UK that was intending to double the power limit of electric motors, so to allow them to go up to 500 watts. It would also have potentially allowed throttles on e-bikes in the UK. As of now, just like Europe, throttles are not allowed on British e-bikes. I think there is an exception for up to like 6 kilometers per hour, about 3 miles per hour, which is basically a like get it started kind of situation, or like a walk assist. But generally, the throttles we think of in the US are not allowed in English e-bikes. And so, while there was some support for this proposal, when the Ministry of Transport, or as the Department of Transport, whatever it's called in England, when they put this out into like a public survey, what they found was that there were mixed feelings among private individuals, but that most cycling organizations were pretty heavily against expanding the power limit for electric bicycle motors. And so the Ministry of Transport basically said, all right, that's it. We're not going to move forward with this proposal. Things are going to stick the way they are. We're going to stay with that 250 watt limit. And if you ask me, I think this is very much emblematic of sort of the divide in e-bike and cycling culture in Europe compared to North America, where in Europe, cycling or certainly electric bikes are much more of a sort of integrated part of a larger public transport ecosystem, and they're seen more as an extension of cycling. They're not basically small motorbikes. In the US, where we don't have as well developed cycling infrastructure, we don't have separate biking lanes, that sort of thing, and people more often have to ride on the street. E-bikes are often more seen as almost like small motorbikes in a sense. You can have hand throttles. Technically, they're only allowed up to 20 miles per hour, but plenty of electric bicycles are found with higher than 20 mile per hour throttles. And people, whether they're throttle or pedal assist, very much like their 28 mile per hour or 45 kilometer per hour electric bikes, which in the US do not require any extra registration, unlike Europe, where a 45 kilometer per hour e-bike is basically treated like a moped, where you need registration and insurance, that sort of thing. So to me, this very much tracks with that sort of cultural divide between North American and European e-bikes. Is that the sense you get, Seth?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think that you don't really think about it from that perspective, but the fact that we don't have any infrastructure in the US, or very little and kind of poor infrastructure, that kind of makes our e-bikes it makes the desire to go fast a higher priority for us, because we're driving on the street with cars that are going 30 and trying to get around us and all the other stuff. For me, like riding on American roads, I would like to go faster. Like I feel safe going 30 miles per hour than I do 20 miles per hour because nobody's trying to get around me, and I'm out there. So I get it. Like I totally get it. And if there was infrastructure, it would be nice to ride in a bike path. Like that would be great. And I would feel safe going 20 miles per hour, and it would be great. It would be, casual. So I totally get it. So, I totally understand the situation. I guess it's sad because, it would be nice to have the option to go faster in the UK, but makes sense.
Yeah, and to me, I found it interesting that a lot of the commenters were against this idea of opening up the power restrictions, and again, like we're not talking about unlimited, right? Like, yes, it sounds big, doubling the power, but it's only 500 watts. It's still only 2/3 of the US limit. But there is significant pushback against this in the UK, more than I would have expected.
Yeah. Well, we'll see how it goes. I mean, I'm sure this isn't the last time we'll hear something like this. And I do kind of feel like there should be some middle ground. Like European bikes are really slow. Like and underpowered, and they all have to lie about it. So like that can't be the right way, right?
Yeah.
All
One
right.
day.
Let's move to another continent. China urges citizens to trade in old lithium e-bikes for newer lead acid electric bikes. Well, that seems like we're going back in time here.
Right? Like it almost seems like either you're reading it wrong or it's written wrong, but that
Right.
is the situation, believe it or not. So in China, which has massive electric bike adoption, though the e-bikes in China are mostly of the basically look like a seated scooter type of device. Like if you're watching the podcast video here with us, it's that model on the right side of the picture that looks like a sort of janky Vespa. Those are what most electric bikes are like in China. But there's something like 350 to 400 million e-bikes on the road in China. So we're talking huge numbers. It used to be the case that they were pretty much all lead acid battery based, right? So this is technology that's basically over 100 years old. Like the first electric cars in the 19 teens and 20s or whatever used lead acid batteries. Those were wet cell, and now we've got nicer sealed lead acid, absorbed glass mat, AGM batteries, but still, this is very old technology. Over the last decade or so, we saw a shift towards lithium-ion batteries, which were longer lasting, significantly, many times longer lasting, lighter, smaller, more powerful, all sorts of benefits. Basically, just price was the main downside, that they were more expensive. And so we saw, a big shift towards lithium-ion batteries. But in the last few years, with more awareness of the safety concerns of lithium-ion batteries, there's been this interesting push from China to go back towards the sort of tried and true lead acid batteries. And in this case, we're seeing this new program instituted by the Chinese Ministry of Commerce, which is creating this trade-in program. So if you have an e-bike in China that has a lithium-ion battery, they will allow you to trade it in for a newer e-bike with a lead acid battery. And then they'll send off the old e-bike and battery to be recycled in some like government recycling or reclaiming center, however well those work. That's a whole other story. But basically, they're trying to sort of replace a lot of these sort of questionable quality lithium-ion batteries that are on the roads. And this comes after some of our readers might remember a few months ago, we learned about China instituting new production standards for lithium-ion batteries, specifically ones produced for the domestic market. So having higher production standards. So this is sort of a multi-pronged approach to get these older lithium-ion batteries off the road. And in this case, replace them with lead acid batteries. And I think it is important to point out that while we certainly have all heard of lithium-ion battery fires, these are still quite rare in the grand scheme of things. Statistically speaking, we're talking about single-digit instances when you've got millions of e-bikes and lithium-ion batteries out there. However, it's still, of course, very important. These can and have been fatal lithium-ion battery fires, so this is not something to mess around with. And it seems like China is, putting out a lot of incentives to help convince people to trade in their older lithium-ion e-bikes. The other interesting thing here is I think that I think it was our last podcast, actually, we were talking about these new sodium-ion batteries
I
that
was just going to
Yadia
bring that
was,
up.
yeah, and so sodium ion, it's seen as this interesting. I don't know if middle ground is the right way to put it, but an alternative to both AGM lead acid batteries and lithium ion because it has the safety advantages of AGM that there's just not a lot to explode in there, but it's longer lasting. It's not quite as small and energy dense as lithium ion, but it's getting close, and the price is coming down as more investment is made into their production. Their production is also very similar to lithium ion in terms of producing the cells, so it doesn't take a lot of retooling or a lot of technological advancement to turn manufacturing centers from lithium ion batteries into sodium ion batteries. So that's an interesting little addition here. But in the meantime, before there's a lot of commercialization with sodium batteries, it seems like China is really pushing to go back to these AGM batteries, which I think it's fair to say never really left. It's just they were starting to lose market share to lithium ion batteries.
Yeah, I mean, I also wonder, like, why not lithium or what is it, iron phosphate? Like, that seems like the new way. I know cattle is kind of owns that space, and maybe it's not as like open to everybody, like lead acid or even the newer sodium batteries. But like it would seem that iron phosphate would have all of the or most of the benefits of lithium ion, except not quite as dense. There's some temperature stuff that's different, but for e-bikes, I think they have like the right mix of stuff. But I imagine that the fact that cattle kind of or CATL kind of owns that whole space, maybe part of the reason why going to lead acid makes sense. Also, I don't know if this plays into it, but do you think the voltage, which is usually 12 volts, and they were kind of put in series of lead acid makes a difference? It's harder to get electrocuted by a 12 volt thing than a 48 volt. I don't know.
I mean, they still end up reaching the same voltage because they'll put them in series, and you'll still get 48 volts out of it. Otherwise, they'd need like jumper cable size wires for all of the
Right, right,
connections. So I think in the end of the day, you're still playing with the same voltage in the system voltage, but certainly you've got that lower voltage when you're putting the batteries in and building them. Um, but it's funny. I mean, since you bring that up, we talk about like, the 12, 24, 36, 48 volt increments from these 12-volt lead acid batteries. And that's the way that lithium ion batteries have been built for e-bikes, but only because they followed this like
right,
paradigm set up by lead acid. So we're kind of returning to this. And if anything, lithium ion never like really fit that well into the 12-volt increments. Like a 36-volt battery is really more like 37 or a little higher. 48-volt batteries are really a little bit lower. Like nothing really fits
right.
well into the 12-volt system. And so going back to AGM, it'll certainly be more convenient for all these component makers.
Yeah, I mean, there's the battery chemistry. There's so much, the charging curve, the output, the temperature. Like, there's a lot of factors involved, and lead acid is like I know like from a cold start, AGM batteries are way better than lithium. I think that's the reason why Teslas still have AGM batteries as their starter and their 12 volt system. I know that Cybertruck is going to 48 volt, but for the moment and up until currently, they still have lead acid batteries in them, which you're like, well, why don't you just use one of the, you guys are pretty good at the lithium batteries. So there's obviously some advantages to the lead acid situation. So I don't know. This seems like maybe a temporary situation. Like I kind of believe that there's going to be some better solutions in the near future, but for the moment, lead acid, I guess, makes some sense.
Yeah, hopefully, we get past this. I mean, we often sort of deride lead acid when we see like, a new vehicle has, oh, it's got lead acid batteries. I mean, at the end of the day, it is a fine technology. It's just an older technology that isn't as convenient in a number of ways. But like China's showing, it still works just fine if you use it.
Yep. All right, let's move on. JackRabbit's new solar charging kit keeps your e-bike topped up from the sun.
This is a fun one. I love this idea of solar chargers for e-bikes, where if you're out like camping or you're doing like an adventure riding and you're going to stop for a few hours for like lunch or rest or something, you roll out a solar panel or unfold it, and suddenly your battery is getting charged back up again. Jackrabbit, makers of these very small, they call them micro e-bikes. Technically, they're more of a seated scooter because it doesn't have pedals, but it feels like a small bike. And they've just released their solar charging kit. And the neat thing about their kit is that despite it being relatively small, I believe it's about a 100-watt panel, it still charges at about the output of their normal wall charger. And so you still get a similar charge time on solar as you do for their, charging straight off of an AC wall outlet. And the reason Jackrabbit can kind of get away with that is because they've got these very small batteries to begin with. So, if you're only filling up a tiny cup, it doesn't really matter how small your hose is. Like, there's just not a lot to fill up, and that's the case here. Now, technically, this is only meant for Jackrabbit's batteries, but Jackrabbit uses a 36 volt 10S battery, so theoretically, it should charge basically any 36 volt e-bike. They'll probably tell you like they don't recommend it for, or they can't verify it'll work for other e-bikes, but it's basically putting out the 42.0 volts that pretty much every 10S 36 volt e-bike battery is looking for. Now, is this something that you could DIY yourself for less than, I think it's like $3.99 or something for their kit? Like, certainly, this is not a complicated piece of kit. Like, I'm sure it's that was probably like your first thought was like, I could make this.
Yeah, I mean, come on.
So like,
it's weird that they
yeah.
charge, like they should just say, hey, go buy this on Amazon and send their people to an affiliate link, because it seems like a very simple, I mean, tell me if I'm wrong, like is there a charge controller on the thing, or
Yeah,
like
so
what?
it's basically a built-in charge controller. So there's sort of like three components here, right? There's the solar panel, which these generally put out somewhere around like 18-ish volts for like a 12 volt standard solar panel. There's the charge controller, so it's taking in that like 12 to 18 volts and outputting it at the 42 volts, or starting lower for a 36 volt battery. And then there's whatever the charging connector is. I think they use like a standard barrel plug.
Good for
Um,
them.
yeah, and then they have an adapter for their batteries. Actually, have, I think it's called an XT60. It's that like yellow connector,
Uh-huh.
but that's on the battery. But then the plug on the bike is a normal barrel connector. So those are sort of like the three pieces. You can buy a solar panel, you can buy a charge controller, you can buy the right connector, and certainly you could DIY this yourself. If you're not familiar with working with batteries and electricity, it can be very dangerous to try and make your own charger. So that is like one part of this, is that they've already solved like the right charging level and everything. So we're not recommending someone do this without the experience to know how to set a charge controller for a lithium-ion battery. But it's not like any of this is rocket science, right? Like, this is not a complicated product.
Yeah, and you'd probably save, probably, I don't know, I think you could probably get this kit for around $200 if you bought the same three parts on Amazon. Some, give or take, but it's good to have something that's built specifically for the brand, that's been tested, is backed by the company. What'd be kind of fun though is like, instead of having this, if they had like a thing that you mounted on the back of the bike, and it's like a back solar thing that you could just kind of leave there at all
Like
times.
a
I mean,
like a
you and I talk
sail,
about, yeah, just not, maybe not a sail, but just like a
like a trailer.
yeah, like a trailer, or maybe more of a sail. I don't know, just something that you could just have the solar panel just sitting there, even while you're
Yeah.
riding it, always collecting energy. We always kind of think about, hey, could we build a bike that was just self-powered by sun. So that this is kind of touching on that little itch that we always have, and I'm not afraid to talk about it when when it. So
Yeah. I mean, this is I did do that like a year or two ago, maybe more now. That DIY solar charge
uh-huh.
bike that had like one 50-watt panel in the front and one in the back. They were each like a little bit bigger than a pizza box.
Yep.
And like it works, but is it, practical for everyday riding?
Not really.
Probably, yeah. So there's the
Yeah.
downside.
I always see these guys that are like riding through the mountains or something like that, and they've got their like trailer with, like 10 solar panels dragging behind it. And, it seems like very DIY. I just wonder if there's like a way like to engineer like a solid, I don't know. It's always like fascinated me. And we do the solar races, the Electrek Solar Challenge every year. And those are basically, three-wheeled bikes. The tires on those things are very small or very narrow. And so that always gets my brain going with that stuff.
Yeah,
But
well, I think the probably the closest we've gotten to like a fairly practical solar powered bike would be either what you described, where they've got like they're sort of towing a trailer with panels, or the like 3 or 4 wheeled recumbents where they've got the big sunshade and basically the entire canopy
right,
is solar. And that way, like it's sort of an added piece. When you make the canopy out of it, like it's not getting in the way like a rack.
right.
It's, adding functional shade, and it just happens to be a solar panel as well.
Yeah, and they have those what they're called, like the Pebble, and isn't there's two of them, right?
Yeah, and the elf.
Pebble and the Elf that are kind of work on that stuff, but those aren't like there's not enough solar to like keep them going. It's just kind of like just sitting there collecting energy, and then you
Yeah.
use it all up as you go along.
Yeah, those are more like sort of trickle charge while you're parked situations.
I think I'm going to make it mandatory that you come to the solar event this year because it's just too much fun. So
Yeah.
block out your 4th of July. Uh,
Yeah,
we're
I'm sad I missed it, but definitely this year I wanna attend.
all right. Let's move on here. All right, the real problem with high power electric bikes on mountain bike trails.
This is becoming more and more evident as we see more of these not electric mountain bikes, but these like high powered, what a lot of people wouldn't even call e-bikes anymore. Trail bikes of the Suron, Talaria, that type of bike style. As we see more and more of these out there, especially with younger riders, we're starting to see a lot more friction on electric mountain bike trails. And we've talked before about how these will often wind up on like beach paths and bike lanes, and cops are starting to crack down on them. And that's one thing when they're like sort of wreaking havoc on a road, but they're becoming a much bigger problem on off-road trails as well. And we actually talked to a few people that have experienced this on different mountain bike trails around the US. And there's a number of issues here because we're starting to see more of these, Suron riders that will go out and they'll find mountain bike trails because mountain bike trails are often really nicely maintained. They're, dedicated rider groups that volunteer to go out and, take care of these trails. And so they're great riding areas, but these high powered e-bikes cause a number of problems, from tearing up the trails that are designed for much, smaller tires, much less aggressive tires, much lighter bikes, that sort of thing, to a lot of these riders who they never really came from cycling culture. They don't understand the rules of mountain bike parks or mountain bike trails. They'll, be going the wrong way. They'll be cutting between different routes. They'll be destroying a lot of the, fragile vegetation on the sides of these trails, that sort of thing. And so there's a lot of animosity, even I would say, that has grown in mountain biking and even among electric mountain bikers against these non bicycle high powered e-bikes that are cropping up more and more on these mountain bike trails. And it's unfortunate because having a Suron or a Talaria, it's like a really cool vehicle, right? Like they're a lot of fun and there are great places to ride them. But I think it's important for people to realize that mountain bike trails specifically are not the place for these what are effectively small electric dirt bikes. You're looking for like OHV trails that are designed for ATVs, UTVs, dune buggies, that sort of thing, that are designed for these types of high powered vehicles, fire roads, that sort of thing. Even overlanding, which is super fun to do in places where there's not even any trails. You're basically like, blazing your own trail on these types of bikes. But the more we see them mixing with mountain bikers on mountain bike specific trails, the more we're seeing this kind of friction where there's trail damage, there's crashes from people just not understanding or just like flaunting the rules all together. And so I think this is going to unfortunately become a increasingly problematic situation on mountain bike trails if something isn't done to basically keep a differentiation between what is an allowable electric mountain bike, a real electric bicycle, and what is a Sur-Ron or a Talaria, or basically like a small electric dirt bike.
Yeah, so I'm kind of in full agreement. Like it's just too tempting. Like as somebody who rides both kind of bikes, like of course you could ride slow on a Talaria on a mountain bike trail. You could. You could ride 20 miles per hour. You could fit in with everybody else. Of course you could. But are you? Like really? Like no, of course not. Because that's the whole point of owning one of those bikes is like you want to go a little faster. It's easy to go faster and it's hard to help yourself. Like somebody in the comments was saying, well, I ride I ride a Talaria and couldn't disagree with you more. Everyone deserves equal access to the trails. The weight and size of the Talaria and Sur-Ron is not drastically more than a regular mountain bike. We're adults, post speed limits, rules, etc., and enforce them. I ride my bike slow as my intent. So I could say the same thing, but I know myself. And of course, like when there's a straightaway, it's freaking fun to go 30 miles per hour or more. Like, of course it is. And then, at the end of the straightaway, there's a turn and there's a guy going slow and you're going fast and it's just a mess. So yeah, I don't think these bikes should be on these mountain trails. And, maybe some trails could have both. I mean, certainly there's moto trails, like those exist. And maybe that's where those should be. But like, yes, realistically, that this is a place for class 1 e-bikes. Like class 1 e-bikes make perfect sense here. You get some help going up the hills and, it allows more people to ride those things. And generally speaking, after 20 miles per hour, you're kind of on your own. So that's my take.
Yeah, and I think, even for the people who say like, I ride it very carefully, I go easy on the throttle, that sort of thing, that's fine, but it's not a good enough policy to just request people to only use 10% of their throttle. When you've
Right.
got a 5 kilowatt motor and essentially like a paddle wheel of an off-road dirt bike tire, I mean, just one slip of the wrist and you're digging furrows into a trail that is a lot more delicate than like a BMX or not a motocross park kind of thing, like it's just a totally different type of a vehicle with a totally different power profile and tire profile that drastically impacts the kind of wear it puts on those trails. And like I ride a lot in Florida where it's very flat, right? And so on mountain bike trails in Florida, a lot of effort is put into designing trails that are very interesting, narrow, curvy, that sort of thing, because there's not a lot of topography. You can't just like enjoy the hills. You've got to put a lot of effort into designing cool trails. And so when someone comes in with a Sur-Ron and just like cuts big furrows right across this trail, then that is a ton of effort from usually volunteers that have gone into maintaining this stuff, just totally down the drain.
Yeah, so I would ask because I'm contemplating this myself. Where would you see something like Luna's X2 Ludicrous bike, which is it's a mountain bike, like it's the same weight profile as a Trek e-mountain bike, that class 1, but because they've kind of overclocked everything, bike with the same weight as a Trek e-mountain bike, But with the possibility of going, 35 miles per hour, how do you feel about that? Where does that fall?
Yeah, so that's like the tricky edge case, right?
Right.
So, I mean, there's two parts of this, right? There's the rider and there's the bike. Like, you can't do anything about the rider. Like, you just hope that they're educated. You hope they understand trail etiquette, etc. So, if you
Mhm.
just focus on the bike, then like theoretically, yeah, that is like built on a real electric mountain bike. It's not a Suron, but I mean, what is that like 1,500 watts or so? Like that's
I mean, it goes way up.
yeah,
Like
like
I think it might even hit 2 kilowatt.
yeah. So that's where it's kind of incumbent upon the person to understand like if you go full power you could damage parts of this trail, and so that's where that's the biggest problem I have is like then we're really relying on that person to say like, all right, you have what is ostensibly an actual electric mountain bike, at least it looks and functions and has mountain bike tires, but you got to understand that you need to use this thing responsibly when you're on a mountain bike trail. When you're on like any other just like off-road trail, fire roads, whatever, like put that thing in ludicrous mode, like knock yourself, I mean, carefully, but go have fun. But on specifically mountain bike trails that you're sharing with dudes that are like pedaling their bikes down these trails, you just got to exercise that self-control if you're on a specific bike like that, which is that edge case of I would almost call it in between like a real electric mountain bike and these sort of dedicated off-road trail bikes.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that would keep you from going too nuts is that the on the X2 Ludicrous, like if you do go really fast for a long period of time, that motor will start overheating. So that kind of keeps you going too crazy. But that said, like that thing can go Suron speeds, even though it looks and weighs just like a motorcycle. So that is a weird edge case, as you say.
Yeah, that one you just hope that people sort of understand the situation they're in and like ride responsibly and also obey those rules. Don't go backwards, don't be like, you know, cutting over other people on the trail.
Right.
Like be a good steward of the trail you're on.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like owning a Tesla Model S Ludicrous. Like it can go 200 miles per hour. It looks like a normal car. Don't do that. That kind of.
Yeah, like if you're in a school zone, you still got to go 25.
Right. Exactly. All right. Let's move on. This is a fun one. The entire Dallas Cowboys team all just got the same electric motorcycles.
Yeah, this is an interesting story. So, the Dallas Cowboys quarterback just gave a an interesting gift to all 85 members of the team. A cake. This is the Maca, I believe, if I'm pronouncing that correct. Electric moped, and they did this by partnering up with I think the company's called e-moto supply.
Yep.
They became Cake's like US based service partner after the like main Swedish company Cake went bankrupt last year, and so they took over the inventory, the spare parts, etc. And I have to imagine there was some sort of sweet deal here to get 85, electric mopeds. I mean, I'm sure Dak Prescott has the money, but like there had to be some sort of like real nice, cush deal because also Emoto Supply obviously got some great PR out of this. They've probably got a lot of bikes that they're hoping to sell, and so this definitely grabbed some headlines. It grabbed our headline, but this is kind of a cool story here because I mean you can see all of the Cowboys here riding. I assume this is like their practice field or something.
Yeah.
Um, and I mean it's kind of funny because a lot of these are huge guys, and this is Cake's smallest bike out of all of them. Like their Osa and their uh, what's the just blanked on the main dirt bike. Cock, the Cake Cock, are both much bigger bikes than this. So you've got these like, 300, 350 pound linemen riding a fairly small electric moped. It's kind of like the circus bear on a tricycle look on some of these
Yeah. I mean,
guys.
yes, it's Cake's smallest, but I think it's like probably one of the burliest e-bikes out there. Like, it kind of rides that line. I mean, it certainly doesn't go terribly fast, but it's no slouch either. Like it's not like
Yeah.
getting them a Brompton or something. Like
Right. And these are mopeds too, right? I mean, technically, so they're moped class. A lot of like, old school folks like get angry with me when I use moped for these types of bikes because there aren't actually any pedals. They're what a lot of people would call scooters. But in most states, the moped class designation includes these types of seated scooters. And so, I mean, this is a moped is essentially like a light motorcycle. These are motorcycle class vehicles. And so, it's not tiny, right? Like it is built to be a motorcycle class vehicle. Now it only goes, I think, 28 miles per hour, maybe 30. So, like you said, these are not super high performance and they're not tiny. Like it's not a Brompton, it's not a small electric bicycle. It is a motorbike, but it's a moped class, smaller motorbike.
right, yeah. No, I just thought it was cool, like especially with Cake kind of going out of business and like their future being a little uncertain. I as I bought 3 of their bikes from this company because they were kind of having like we're clearing out the warehouse situation. So and those bikes have been great. We got the Cake Hawk something, and I can't remember what it's called, but
Yeah.
very weird name that you can't Google because I don't know why they named it that, but it's just like it's a good. I don't want to call it a stunt. It's a good PR move because you're getting the Cake name out in front of people again, and this is obviously. I mean, this might have been free. Who knows? Because like the amount of publicity they're getting is probably going to be worth whatever the cost was. But it's going to be great for the company. Like all these Cowboys players are going to be riding around their hometowns. People are going to see them. It's probably a great thing for all involved there. And those are great bikes. When I picked up mine, I was kind of jealous that somebody else had bought a few of these, and I thought this would be a really nice bike to have around town, and would have been a lot safer for my son probably as well.
Yeah. Oh, so they were sold out of these when you got your deal?
Yeah, that was kind of the thing.
That's a bummer. Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, this is like you said, I mean, these are well made. That was part of the problem was that these are not like super cheap to produce bikes. Like Cake
No,
put a lot of effort into building these. Like it's not just the Scandinavian design. These were well-made machines. And
and the shipping, it's heavy at 132 pounds, and not foldable by any stretch. So this is a big. It was basically a motorcycle and mopeds clothing.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Well, good for them. I mean, it's good to see the publicity at least.
Yep.
All right, last story. If anybody has any comments, throw them in the comment area. I see we have, let's see how many people right now, 460 people live. So somebody besides Carl, who we appreciate, should chime in with something here. The last story is troubled off-road electric motorbike maker enters receivership.
Yeah, this is UBCO, a New Zealand-based electric motorcycle maker. They've been around for a while. I'm not exactly sure. I think it was 2016, if I'm not mistaken, something like that, when they were founded. And they're famous for their 2x2, which is a all-wheel drive electric motorcycle. It's a super burly frame. It kind of looks a little bit like that Cake Maka we were just looking at with the Cowboys, but like super beefed up. And these were very much designed as off-road first electric motorbikes. They sort of went the zero route in that way, as they started with building off-road bikes, and then after a few years, they created new models that were street legal, designed for sort of dual purpose. They expanded into several different models, but their 2x2 was always their main bike. And they even recently just had this big partnership with the Australian Postal Service to outfit a large number, I think it was like 80 or something, motorbikes to Australia Post so that they're used in a lot of rural areas for delivering mail. But unfortunately, we've just found out that the company has entered receivership, which is sort of like bankruptcy, but it's designed to be a recoverable, right? Like it's not that the company's throwing up their hands and saying we're done. They've entered a receivership, so it's designed to hopefully find a buyer to, um, lessen the load of debt. And if UBCO's lucky, they'll be able to recover from this. Someone will pick up the company, and maybe we'll see them come back out and begin, producing and selling bikes again. As of now, it's not looking good for the brand. I think it's fair to say, which is really unfortunate because they had such a unique lineup. They had a an electric dirt bike as well that they had acquired and brought under the UBCO name, but definitely these 2x2s that we're looking at here, just such a really cool, rugged off-road style electric motorbike, all-wheel drive, and really designed for carrying a ton of cargo. And as you can imagine, from any electric motorcycle company coming out of New Zealand, designed for just some really rugged terrain and that kind of like off-road exploring. So this one is really unfortunate, and it follows what we've seen from several other motorcycle makers. We just talked about Cake, Energica, Saunders. Multiple companies have unfortunately gone this route, as the last couple of years have been pretty tough on electric motorcycle makers, e-bike companies as well, but certainly a lot of different two-wheeled e-bike companies have been suffering the last few years, and UBCO was not any different in that respect. And so, man, I wish them luck, but I don't see good things in store here unless they can find like a 11th hour buyer.
Yeah, I always hope that, like, against hope really, that maybe a major Japanese like gas motorcycle maker is like, you know what, let's just swoop up, get this IP, we'll honor some warranties, and we'll turn this into one of our bikes or one of our lines. Obviously that's not as easily said and or done as said, but kind of hope against hope that these things work out. I mean, how do you start, like, especially in New Zealand, how do you start an electric motorcycle brand? It's got to be almost impossible, like, to spool that up, because you have such a small home base. You have these major players in China and elsewhere coming after you. It just seems so daunting. Like you'd have to be crazy to try. Like, I don't want people to stop trying, but it just seems like such a daunting task.
Yeah, and not only did they try, but they were succeeding for so long. Like they even
Right.
expanded into the US, which is like literally half a world away from New Zealand.
Yeah. Well, maybe a Chinese brand will see some value in this and swoop them up. Maybe one of their suppliers or something uh, will say, "Hey, let's supply a lot more of these, and work out the other stuff too. Move up the value chain a little bit."
Yeah, we can only hope.
All right, let's see what we have in the comments section. All right, Carl. Before I learned anything about batteries, I always assumed the volume or mass or distance determined the voltage of the lead acid batteries. Actually, lead acid cells within battery fundamentally are 2 volts. Yeah, I guess it splits down. You have the 6 volt, then split that in half. Whatever. Anyway,
Yeah, well, there are usually six of those. So he's right. The base cell of a lead acid is 2 volts, and there are
right.
generally six of those in those 12-volt
In a 12
bricks.
volt, right.
Yeah.
Unless there's more and they do them, not series parallel, whatever. Anyway, yeah. All right. So they included 6 and called it a 12-volt battery. Kind of finished up that thought there. And then he says, long distance solar bike tours describe constantly retilting panels toward the sun or riding in the right part of the road to expose their panel. Cool, but not without its challenges. Yeah, I mean, there's all that stuff. It's got to be frustrating and hard to do.
That's a good point. Like imagine if you're on like a highway with trees on either side, like depending on the shadow, a few feet could mean charging or not charging.
I've heard stories similar to that from the solar racers. Like they will drive on the part of the street. I mean, they can see where the sun is shining,
Right.
right? So they purposely go to that side of the street, which is obviously, if that side of the street is coming traffic this way. You can't do that, or you have to be careful. So it's a lot of equations, and but maybe at some point there'll be some AI that'll figure it out or whatever. And then lastly, a little housekeeping request that I've already taken care of. We should change our background away from Cybertruck, the antithesis of two-wheeled EVs. All right, it's done. It's gone. Our assignment for next week, we're going to get our talented artist, Michael Bauer, on a new wheelie, two-wheeled background that we'll have for you in 2 weeks, Carl. So thanks for that suggestion, and check back in 2 weeks. Sound
I didn't
good?
even notice it was back there.
Yeah, it was, and I pulled it. So now
Nice.
we got to find something new.
Well, I'm excited to see what there's going to be next time.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you all for tuning in. Come back in another 2 weeks so you can join us to be surprised as well by what our new background is on the next episode of the Wheelie Podcast. See you next.